Ken was also on the former Board of Governors for the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce. He's a regular supporter of children's charitable organizations, including Make-A-Wish Foundation, Turn Community Services, and Habitat for Humanity, and several others. Ken loves to speak on topics near and dear to his heart, which would be design, business, and family. Ken has recently presented his ideas to Utah State University School of Business and to the University of Utah, and many others. So let's give a hearty Snow College Badger welcome to Ken Coburn.
Person in your own personal life, and it's a topic that helps, that applies particularly when you're trying to get a group of people working together, happily working together, and contributing all towards the same goal. Measuring and motivating performance. Okay, I'll steer from back here. A little bit about us. We're an engineering software reseller, but early in my career, I used to develop software. As the markets developed, as software, the whole industry developed, a lot of really good offerings became available. Well, the offering we're selling right now was developed out of MIT, and really good offering. So we now resell products from that other manufacturers make, and we teach engineers how to use those products. We provide technical support. So the business model, if you think about it, is maybe similar to a car dealer. We're in the distribution channel. We own territories, and we sell products in those territories and help people within those territories use them. I'm a sole proprietor or an S corp, and I say with a long-term focus. So I'll hit my 28th anniversary in 2 weeks. Started it as a sophomore in college. It started as just a little school project that accidentally turned into a business. So, and I've been with it. I've loved every day in what I do. We've grown. We're now multi-regional. We've got a little over 20 offices throughout the West Coast and the Gulf Coast, and we do have plans for expansion, and we'll fill in most of the rest of those states for West Mississippi here soon, I believe. One characteristic about us is we have been able to produce consistent, strong results. We've had a lot of recognition from the community. In 1994, we were on the E500, one of the top, fastest growing companies in the U.S. We've been a 10-time winner of the Utah 100, which is private Utah companies rated on their growth, their percentage of growth. And a few years ago, I was nominated as Entrepreneur of the Year. So, and I was a finalist, became a finalist in that in 2007. So we've had a lot of recognition from the business community, had a lot of recognition from our peers and our vendors. We've grown to become number one, started in little Salt Lake City, and grown to be number one in a bunch of areas. You may not know what these two products are, or Cherry, or you may. And we're the market leaders in some niche areas starting a business or looking at working, it's easier to compete in niche areas. You can become more of a specialist, and it's easier. You have a little more flexibility. You're not driven as much by the market. So that's worked very well for me. A few years ago, I could say our growth, our compounded annual growth was over 70% per year for almost 10 years in a row. Our growth has slowed. Actually, our revenue growth is still accelerating, getting larger every year. But the law of big numbers or small numbers, the percentages start getting harder to compete against. But we do have a very substantial 37.5% compounded annual growth over 12 years. Is, in hindsight, difficult. It worked for us, but as I compare ourselves against other companies, that is a difficult thing to accomplish over a sustained period of time. I talked a little bit about this. We're a channel business or distribution. Because we're in the distribution channel, our business model is slightly different than somebody who's going to take their company public, or they come out and invent a product, our customers, and they have 100% control over their market, their marketing, their products. It's those types of companies that can get huge growth real quick, go public. They do tend to level off a little bit, but we're a business where we focus on operational excellence. We do well just by operating the business well. It's not one, like I say, you take out, you sell out, you just operate it over time, and it produces revenues and profits for you. And that's, so, I'd say operational excellence is our strategy, more than anything. How we differentiate ourselves, we have other companies that we compete against and that sell the same types of products. It's our services and the way that we help implement and coach people to use the products that we differentiate ourselves. So we create unique business value there. We probably, from a product standpoint or differentiation, this is really where we stand out different from our competitors. We focus more in this area, and technology, as technology has matured, it's very easy for companies to build complex technology contraptions. They just keep accumulating technology. You can almost get buried with the load. And we've been able to lead our customers to very simple, cost-effective solutions. In a way, we sell more technology by selling each customer less technology. We help them leverage it. Technology is an accelerator. If you have a good business model, it accelerates a good business model. If you have a bad business model, it slows you down as well. So that's how we differentiate ourselves as a channel model. Just a little bit of history. I told you that we'll be celebrating our 28th anniversary. I started as an AutoCAD reseller. You guys are in engineering, drafting, may have heard of AutoCAD. The early versions of that product was introduced in about late 1982, early 1983. The IBM AT, I don't know if anybody knows what that is. that was a 286 processor, a 16-bit processor. It's really the first time computers or personal computers were even powerful enough to handle a tool like that. That's when we started the business. We sold AutoCAD and we developed specialized utilities that ran on top of it. It was a generic tool, maybe like Excel. And what we did is we built on custom utilities, custom programs that made it specific for a civil engineer or an architect or a mechanical engineer that took that generic tool. So almost like we would customize Excel for different markets. though we were succeeding together, we just knew that at some point we had to split. Well, that happened in 1989, and I continued on doing the business that we're doing now. He went into another line of the business, and he's very successful doing that. We just had different philosophies. So I interject that because as you think about starting businesses, or if you do, you may have partners. And that might be, when you start a business, I'll tell you, that everybody wants a partner. They want somebody to sit there and take the risk with them and help out, carry the load. That's good and bad. I've had some good partners, and I've had some difficult ones as well. In 1989, we just rolled that into a company called Advantage Computing, doing the same thing. We were, once again, a local AutoCAD reseller. We kind of focused on some of the things I wanted to focus on in services, customer services. And I had some really good guys that worked for me that we developed some custom software utilities once again. But right after 1989, Microsoft Windows was introduced. And there were a lot of games out on the market. Flight Simulator, what's the golf game called? It was a golf game, but they ran on non-Windows platforms, or Microsoft MS-DOS, if anybody knows or remembers what that was. And it was difficult to run games in Windows because of the multitasking environment. If you were in one window, you had Excel running a calculation in one window, it would make all of your audio and video jittery, and you needed buffering. Well, we ended up developing a product that Microsoft looked at and bought from us called Microsoft Golf. I don't know if anybody still plays with that or not, but it was our first big success. As a software reseller, to some degree, sometimes you feel like a rock star or a rock band, and you'll have a one-hit wonder, or you'll have a hit song, and money's great, and you're famous, and then a few months later, it's like the money stops flowing in, and who, what? You have to come up with your next big hit. And so that was an up and down type of business model. In 1996, the product we're selling now was introduced. It's the product Solidworks. It's developed out of MIT. And we took a look at it. It was the same time Windows started becoming really Microsoft Windows 3.1, the network version. And it was at the point where it started to become solid enough to be used as an engineering platform, I guess is the best way to describe that. I got rid of all of the rest of our business, and I changed directions on, I watched a 20-minute demo of somebody develop a product on Solidworks and Microsoft Windows that would have taken us hours to do with the current technology that we were selling. And I changed the direction of the company, and I wanted to go multi-location. I wanted to expand this, take it out. My software developer partner wanted to focus more and more on game development. So once again, we split in 1996. He was a great partner. While we were together, aware of it, but they would fight against each other a little bit. Or in other words, if he had a big announcement coming out or a big release, I would ease up on what I was doing to make cash available for all the marketing and the efforts. And then if he knew I had a big deal coming up, he would ease back on what he was doing to make cash available for the other side. We split we started the idea. It took us about 2 years to do it really smoothly, but between 96 and 98, we split. And as we split, both of our businesses took off very quickly. And we didn't realize until we had gone through that split how much we were holding each other back. So another business lesson learned, I guess. then in 2000, as we split, I started acquiring other businesses and getting into new geographies. And there was another company in California called Advantage Computing. So I had a trademark problem. And I had to find a name real quick that allowed me, that I could trademark, first of all, in North America, so that I had some territory to expand into without having to deal with this shit. I had to find a name, and I had to go buy an internet URL. And back in those days, what would you call them? There were a lot of guys that just come up with, on GoDaddy.com. GoDaddy didn't exist back then, but they just come up with all these internet names, business.com, also. And, for $2 or $3 back then, they would register those names. And then if somebody wanted it, they would turn around and sell it for a couple of $100,000. And this one cost me a couple of $100,000, but I got it. It's turned out to be a good name and a good brand. But as I see these slides, it brings back memories of how we had to negotiate and grow through just to get a trademarkable name that we could have growth across the nation. I wanted to talk a little bit about the phases of growth I've gone through. So if you're thinking of starting a business, or this might make you decide whether to start your own or work for somebody else's, but initial growth in a business is a lot of hard work. I grew up in Preston, Idaho, an area very similar to Ephraim. I grew up working on a farm, working with my dad, and hard work wasn't a problem for me. And I put my head down for about 7 years and worked through, I call initial growth, if you're starting your business, is just brute force applied at the right time. It's a lot of hours. You have zero resources or very little resources, but you have a lot of opportunity. You just have to pace yourself and you win a deal and you take that money and you go buy a chair. And you win another deal and you go buy a desk. And then you go buy a phone system. And it takes you a long time to get up to where you have the resources and the capital to really start building momentum. So that was my first 7 years. In fact, I was so focused on it, I remained single that entire time. I knew I really wasn't going to be able to succeed much in a marriage. I don't necessarily think that's required of everyone to go do that, but I was fairly driven in what I was doing. So mid-stage growth, I call that the next 7 years. Once you have the resources, once you have a market, you've got a start, and you've got some momentum. Really for me, the next thing was recruiting top performers. And this is when I recruited a few guys that started selling well and could execute well. And that's when I hit the Inc. 500. That was from about, I think Inc. 500 wants 3 to 5 years of history, growth history, to be able to, so that you could be eligible. And I think that started in 89 or 90, and by 1994 we were awarded that. So that was, I credit that to incenting and rewarding and recruiting top people, taking good care of them. There was a concept I since later learned that when you're recruiting, if you recruit A players, and this is true of sports, it's true in business, A players attract A players. You're not going to get a top guy unless there's other top guys on your team. If you don't have top guys, B players attract C players. Why? Because they don't, C players, they're not intimidated by it, or they are intimidated by an A player. They want somebody a little easier to work with. And that recruiting and team building affects your performance over time. So A trade, big key number 8 player, that is one key of sustained advantage. You've got to have top performers motivated. So maybe before I get into this last topic, in 2007, I was asked as Entrepreneur of the Year in my interview, what got you to the point of where you're at now? And my answer was top people, right? And so that got me to 2007. By then, we had been already #1 in many categories and recognized. And then, as I look back over the past 5 years, so how did I get past that? Because as you manage people, as you have organizations, once you're the best, where's the incentive to get better? How are you going to take that next leap forward? And really, that gets me to the point on which I wanted to spend a little bit of time today. And for sustained growth, continuous team development, it's really about empowering employees. You can't have just top management. You can't have just a few superstars that's propelling the entire company. You've got to have everybody engaged, everybody empowered. And that is what creates sustained growth. If you're in a public company, public companies are measured quarterly. There's a huge, and I have a bunch of friends who are CEOs of public companies, and there's this huge temptation every quarter to go to your superstars. It's like, you got to get me you got to get me to the end of the quarter, you got to get me to the end of the quarter. You get to the end of the quarter, you get into the next quarter, you got to get me to the end of the quarter. What happens in that, if you start going to your superstars, you start empowering them more and taking less power from everybody else in the organization. And it gets harder and harder and harder to move. And if you can stay with fundamentals, stay with everybody on your team and empower them, it's real key to a very long, sustained performance. So, as I look at this, if you're I'll call this, or define a sustainable leader. What are the traits? I just talked about this, but not all leaders do this. A lot of leaders are egocentric. They think they're the reason business is doing well, the team is doing well. A good, sustainable leader empowers all the team members. Okay? They truly value and recognize their input. A sustainable leader creates an environment of continuous improvement. This is something that we initiated a long time ago. But instead of creating a big, hairy goal, what they call it a BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal, we focus on our people to let's just get 1% better this week. Let's just get 1% better next week. We take tiny steps. We go very slow to create very strong, quick, sustained growth. If you think about it, 1% a week is 50% a year. We sustained over 50% a year for over 10 years, and we're slowing down a little bit, but we're still outpacing the marketplace. 1% a week. It's easier also to get a team to go 1% a week as opposed to individuals where you're trying to get, you got to give me 10% more, you got to give me 10% more this week. A sustainable leader accepts and expects mistakes. I'll talk a little bit more about mistakes and what I've learned, but non-fatal errors should be expected. You should be able to learn from mistakes, and rather than blame others. Blame is something you want to pull out of your organizations, out of high-performing teams, and it comes right along with the territory of mistakes. If you're not making mistakes, you're not pushing the envelope hard enough, right? It always accepts challenges willingly. That always helps you drive progress. Most good leaders are always the first one to raise their hand and say, I'll take that, I'll take that challenge, I'll accept responsibility. A lot of good leaders will accept responsibility even if they weren't responsible, because everybody else is running around hiding from responsibility. And they're the ones who show up in organizations who really scale up quick. And something really interesting we found, our best leaders, our best managers are very well read. They're the ones who are continuing their education after they're hired. You get a lot of people who get their job, they plateau. It's like, oh, I've got my education. These are the guys that are bringing in new, fresh ideas every week in meetings, well-read people. It's something that I wasn't aware of until recently, and you just start making those observations. And we've got a reading list, recommended reading list within the company. Some people engage with it, some people don't. People that are engaging with it are the ones who are rising up through leadership positions. A few things learned about people. Sustainable success developed, this is also for a leader and manager, but really depends on how well you work with and develop others. Success in business, you can be in technology, you can be in manufacturing. Success in business ultimately is how well you work with people, how well you engage with them, how well you care about them, how well you help them, teach them, and lead them. You can get short bursts of success using some technical tricks or fear, but it's not sustainable, I believe. And really, ultimately, if you're a leader, your success is about your people. It's not about you. And that right there, that personality, then you need to be able to recognize this in yourself and in others, managers. I'd probably say less than 50% of the people have that characteristic out there in the market. And less than 50% of the managers have that characteristic about them. But that's where you're going to find the sustainable guys. I talked about this a little bit. A players attract A players. B players attract C players. Decide on where you're going to go. I compete against guys who quite often will go out and they're all about expenses, and they're going to go get this team and pay them less. And anybody will take the job. They're just so easy to compete against. Competition, if you do things well, and you have discipline to do things well, competition in the marketplace is very easy. There's not a lot of companies that do things well. That was kind of a surprise to me as I got out working and competing. I'll call this the MJ principle. I came up with this back when Michael Jordan was playing, and really, it's another thing I learned. A lot of people look at entrepreneurs and they think, "Oh, it's a risk taker. He's a risk taker. Oh, that was kind of risky, wasn't it?" And most entrepreneurs aren't taking a risk unless they know that they can handle it. It might be risky to somebody else, but they might have the skill sets to do it. And this also goes back to attracting A players. Is you are working in a less risky environment if your people are better skilled than your competitors' people. And we line up our sales force just like a sports team might do a lineup and matchups against another team. All we need is our sales rep in this territory to be better than our competitor's sales rep, and he wins 90% of the deals. But it's, 1% change in skill set and lineup changes a huge amount what your results are. So anyway, that's another quick lesson learned. If you get all these little things working right for you, competition's easy. Now here's something I've learned over management. The best people, the best employees are the hardest to keep. The worst employees are the hardest to get rid of. It's just it's just the way it is. But if you manage like I think I revert a number one above. If you manage with the skill sets above, your worst player, your worst people are intimidated, and they will go find another job on their own. And your best employees don't feel like they're carrying all the load. That does get frustrating if you're a top guy in a mediocre company. You get burned out because you feel like you're carrying the load. You're earning all the money that's paying everybody else's payroll, and so that's performance in psychology has a lot to do with success in business. Here's one key thing that we do to keep people always performing. How do you keep from plateauing? And I think it's a mistake a lot of businesses make. A lot of businesses will set a target and have you go hit it. or use the guy in the next cubicle to say, well, he's doing this, you should be able to kick his butt, right? All of our measurement systems, all of our reporting systems for our people are measuring them against themselves. It's comparing, well, how did you do last month? How did you do last quarter? Are you getting better in any number of areas? And we only focus on areas where they're, maybe trending down, and we're not trying to change everything about them. We just take the area that they're trending down and work with them and coach them and try to lead them back. So we measure people against themselves, not others. Another reason to do that is, say you're number one. Who are you measuring yourself against? How are you going to become better if everybody else that you're competing against is not as good as you? But if you're measuring against yourself, you always know. When I've been up on stage picking up awards saying I'm number one, in the back of my mind I'm thinking, we can do that. I go, it was that easy? I'd say, yeah, you guys are losers. Maybe not quite as direct, but I've always known that I've had a lot more ability and growth and improvement that I can do when I'm sitting there holding the number one trophy. So measure against yourself. It'll keep you from plateauing. And but you can motivate against others. Okay, that is harder to motivate against others if you're the best. But you can always find somebody that's better. There's always somebody at another company, somebody else to look up to look at. The key here is to create visible real-time results. Have good reporting systems. Have everybody aware of how they're doing and how they're doing against others. And the more competitive people will look and use those systems. They cannot stand to be down lower, and they're going to work to stay up. But you've got to keep it visible, or they won't know how they're compared against others. The non-competitive people are not going to look at those charts as much, but a lot of things in business are counterintuitive. I would say risk is counterintuitive. Like I said, as an entrepreneur, you looked at quite often as, man, that was a risky move, as I mentioned earlier. Well, there's a lot of things about risk that most businesses don't get right. I don't believe. And if you have a team that's empowered to make a mistake, they're also empowered to fix it. If you have a team that's not empowered to make a mistake, nobody talks about mistakes, right? Like, oops, I know there's something there, I'm not going to mention it, And businesses don't fail because they made a mistake. Businesses fail because they ignored mistakes for a very long time, and they built it. So mistakes are okay, right? I make mistakes all the time. If you're empowered to make a mistake, quite often you can fix it before anybody knows that it was even a mistake. I do that all the time. Pace of progress in companies are much faster in companies that are willing to make mistakes. Okay, the opposite of that is risk intolerant organizations are slow and avoid change. It's like, we're not going to do this. That sounds risky to me. But if you have a culture of making mistakes, you're actually making fewer mistakes, fewer big mistakes. Learn to fail fast, same concept. If you're doing the first two things well, my advice is when you come to a fork in the road, take it. Okay? If you have the ability to make decisions real quick, maybe it's faster to take the fork in the road and figure out, oops, that's the wrong one, I back up and I go down the other one. Risk-intolerant organizations will stand there and try and decide which way am I going to go for a very long time, usually until the opportunity that they're seeking passes. And, as I mentioned, the MJ principle, risk is diminished with skill. Take on things you know you have the skill to do well. Hire people that have the skill that can handle this well, and you reduce your risk as you move forward. Culture of truth. This is probably even the most core of all topics. Most organizations, whether it's similar to risk, they are very good at avoiding the truth. A lot of people in the organizations. And I'll tell you why as we move forward. But you really need to come up with a way where everybody can understand the facts and accept the facts quickly. So good organizations are very quick to agree on the facts, okay? Then argue about what to do about them. As opposed to the opposite. Many companies will argue about the facts. Because if facts aren't good, you know, this is companies, this is people within companies, it's managers. It's like, ooh, if I admit this, I'm bad. We've really worked to build a culture of people who can, hey, it's okay. You know, we make mistakes. Let's talk about the facts. If we know the truth, we can make better decisions. We reward people with truth, accuracy, and critical dialogue. We allow people to argue. We just don't argue about the facts. We talk and have critical dialogue about how to change them if our trends are going bad, or looking for new ideas. And yeah, a new idea might be risky, but hey, offer it up anyway. Really, the thing that kills truth in all organizations is this. We use information to teach, motivate, and lead. If you use information against somebody, you're not going to get the right information. If you all of a sudden, if information can be used against you, why would you offer up any information? Right? That's too risky. So we're very careful. We work with our managers to be careful about this. We're careful about this with our reports. We don't point fingers with information. But in that information, is a gold mine of coaching and leadership topics that you can work through with people. And you just, 1% a week, just focus on the information and focus somebody on where they can improve 1% this next week. I've worked with a lot of companies that have a lot of brilliant people, terrific decision makers, and I've watched their field people giving them bad information. So we have great decision makers with wrong information. They're making bad decisions, right? Truth is very important. Not many companies, I would say, have the ability to deal with, understand, and accept the truth. It's culturally very difficult, and all it takes is a few managers to fill that, or a few executives. And I am, it's maybe fairly good timing, I've got one question for you. Well, I've got a question and an answer for you, but I wanted to ask, anything I talked about there that you want me to spend any more time on? Any questions about our background, about truth, about risk?
Yeah, when you were first starting, how did you start with resources? How did you slowly increase interest? Did you do a process where you sell this little supply something?
So the question was, how did I start? How did I get over that resource problem? I had very little money. I had student loans that I was carrying. I was working my way through college, and I had zero money, and I started this business. I kind of started it accidentally. It was a student project, and I was just trying to prove to myself. I was going to school in landscape architecture and environmental planning, and I knew as I graduated, I would probably be 90% of the jobs in that are going into business by yourself. And I thought, I'm a dud at parties. I'm dull. I'm quiet. I get back in the corners and I avoid talking at parties. And I thought, I need to go out and before I do anything else, before I finish this degree, see if I can talk. See if I can go knock on somebody's door. See if I can feel good about myself. And what I found out when I did that, and it was just kind of my own personal project during summer, between quarters, was I went into business by myself and I started getting a few architects going with AutoCAD and selling them a system and putting it together. And I found out I could speak well about business and about engineering. I just didn't speak well in a party situation, maybe. And So I won a few deals. I got a little bit of money, enough to do the next one. And I tripped across a really big opportunity at Utah Power and Light. And right there at the end, I was about ready to go to school. And there was a project at Utah Power and Light that they were going to replace their current CAD system, which was based on mainframes at the time. I was the only PC company that submitted. Everybody else were mainframes. And I customized everything they wanted in the software for the demo. And all of my competitors were just selling, their ability to do that. And out of naivety, I worked hard. I put that together. I won the deal, and it took me 2 years to put it together, to deliver all of that stuff. And by then, I had a fairly large customer base and I was able to get back to school. But even with that, that was a lot of money. It was a lot of good stuff. That was ultimately $2 million worth of revenue with good margins. But through that whole time, I literally was buying a chair, buying a desk, buying a phone system, and it was really 5 to 7 years before I really got over the hump to where I had enough of a savings to hire somebody. If you go out and hire a sales rep, nowadays for 50 or 80 grand, you got to have $50,000 or $80,000 to pay them, or you can't hire them. So you've got to have a savings account as well. So, hopefully that answered your question. How to get over the resources. A lot of hard work, a lot of time, fiscal conservancy. Save your money. Don't spend much in the beginning. Anything else? Any other questions? So, go ahead.
What was your how do you decide how to make a good read? Because I got business planning and stuff, and I was on one of the I did
So, question is, how do you decide what's a good risk? He's got some ideas, wants to pursue. It's a good risk when you know you can do it. And that might take, it might take, if you think it's going to take a year, you're going to have to live off of some other money for a year. You're going to have to, it might take a little bit of investment. Where are you going to get that money? Can you, continue on with mac and cheese for another year while you're putting, it's that. Are you married? Or, what's in your personal life? How are you going to balance and measure that? How much time do you have to put into this? Those are all things you can do to say, not worth the risk. Oh, I can do this, and nobody else is. And, I keep finding areas that I can compete in because nobody else is willing to do it. And I know we've got the skill sets. And that's what I did starting the business, too. It's like, nobody else is taking this on. Why? And I have enough income coming in to do it. I started off in the introduction. I forgot about that. But we've made a business out of being willing to tackle the hard things. Most businesses don't tackle the hard things. They're just out there trying to get money in any way they can, pay bills. And if you can do that and build a culture, that's another niche area, I would say. It's not a niche industry, but it's the willingness to tackle hard things is, or something new or different. It's less risky in a way. Anything else? Okay, I've got one. I'll give you my question and answer here real quick, and this does relate back to the topic. But what are my top career achievements? Any guesses? Yeah, I've done well financially. That's not it. I learned, and I didn't realize this until a few years into business. Actually, until a long time. Not everybody loves their job. In fact, most people don't. Best thing that's ever happened to me, my best career achievement is loving what I work, doing what I do every day. When you're looking to start a business, work in a business, you can compete longer and better if you love what you're doing. If you don't like what you're doing, you can last a couple of years and you got to get out of there. And we compete against a lot of people that don't love what we're doing, and they're easy to compete against. So I'll take that. There's one other thing. Creating a work environment where everybody else loves what think we've done a good job of that, and that has created sustainable growth, happy, and it will keep us there for a long time. So I'll finish with that. Thanks.
Wonderful.